This is Tim.
I'm Mulele.
And this is Critiquing Comics. Welcome to Critiquing Comics. This is Tim with Mulele in Tokyo, and we're running behind on submitted comics, so we've got 2 of them this episode. And let's get started with Days of Dark Fire.
Okay.
Written by Giovanni Smith, art by, Mike Gaughran. I hope that's right, Gaughran. And Giovanni wrote to us. So he is the, besides being the writer of this comic, he's the president of the publisher Sinopia Comics, which has sort of an interesting business model. It's pay what you want self-publishing platform. So people can, what he mentions in the comic, in the back matter, is that essentially it's free, but you can pay $0 or you can pay $100 or whatever you want to for the issue. So it'd be interesting to see how that goes, if it's successful or not.
I did hear of a ramen shop in Tokyo that did something similar. And it was maybe about 15, 20 years ago, but they did a TV show on it, and you can see, like, a guy walks in, says, I think your ramen is worth 300 yen. And you just see the guy say, great, and he kind of takes it on the chin and keeps on going. I don't know. I think at the time, a lot of people would just take advantage of that shop, or at least I imagine they would. Mm-hmm. But I think this is kind of like an alternative to a Patreon comic.
Yeah.
Or rather having a Patreon up for a comic, for a web comic. Mm-hmm. So it really is pay what you want, including $0, which means don't give us your credit card information, just, get the comic. I kind of wonder what the difference is here.
Yeah, I don't know. Well,
unless it's a printed comic. If it's a printed comic, that's a hard business.
Yeah, with the overhead. Yeah, I didn't check on, like, how is it available and in what format, but we've got PDFs, of course, from Giovanni. But
I'm actually looking at the credits page. There's an ISBN number. Mm-hmm. I'm assuming that's for print. I don't know if they put ISBNs on like Kindle books or stuff like that.
Yeah, they do. In fact, as I recall, so when I self-published my English study book a few years ago, I believe I had to use a different ISBN for the digital version.
Okay. Then who knows? But yeah, if it was printed, the pain.
Yeah.
Unless you got some real generous people in this fucked up economy saying, you know what, this guy, he deserves my money. Here's $1,000 or here's $100 or whatever for the book.
Yeah. Anyway, so the story, the first issue, he sent us the first 3 issues. The first issue starts with a page full of information dump about sort of the background of the whole story and how this planet, this place, had 200 years ago, there were 2 phoenix birds, a dark phoenix and a gold phoenix. Dark phoenix was X-Men, I think. No, different thing. But and these 2 phoenixes led armies against each other, and there was a big war, which eventually ended up in magicians on either side sort of, imposing mystic chains on the other side's phoenix. So now it says almost 200 years later. And I don't know, getting into the story, I was feeling like I wanted to feel a little more informed about the backstory. I mean, it would have been nice to have some illustrations to go with it. I felt a little lost at first. But what we have in the first issue, so there are two princes and a king, of course, and the younger one is kind of like the guy who's always screwing up, and then this sort of spy guy who's sneaking around comes to him in his sleep and convinces him to do something to prove himself, which just gets him in more trouble when he does it. But eventually what happens is that this younger prince and his smart aleck best friend and an Amazon and an ogre go on this secret mission into basically the opposition area from that war. And I read the first issue, I read the second issue, I sort of ran out of time. I got started on the third issue. The first issue was a little rough around the edges, particularly I felt like the art got a lot better in the second one. The writing, and I had a few problems, mostly also in the first issue. By the time I got to the second issue, I felt like it was kind of humming, and I found it pretty enjoyable. What did you think?
Never got to the second issue.
Oh.
And actually, I got caught on the first sentence. Many believe there was only one great phoenix. They would be wrong. I don't know. Does that seem grammatical?
Yeah, I think it's okay.
Okay. Seems a little bit off to me.
Well, yeah, it does feel a little off, but I'm not sure why.
Okay.
I suppose it's because it's a tense problem.
Yeah.
Yeah, many believe that's present tense, but it should be they are wrong. Yeah, that's the problem.
Yeah, the other thing is that the great phoenix, at least one of them is still alive and readily accessible, even if it is in chains.
Yeah, we see it in the story.
So, is not correct either.
Right, yeah. I'm not sure why it's past tense.
Yeah, so I got stuck there, but basically what I felt for the first issue, you're right, it's rough around the edges, both artistically and in the writing. And basically the thing that I felt is that it's doing too much. It is really packing in as much world building as it can in every panel. And it's just like, man, slow down. I want to understand and feel these characters. This guy with the golden mask, I have no idea what he's about. And he's like, I got to destroy this village. And then he sees the prince with the fire, Phoenix fire, in his eyes and says, oh, okay, now I've got to save this village. And it's like, wait a minute. If you did nothing, it would die. But now you're going to save it, but we don't know what the trouble is exactly. I don't know. Did I miss something?
No, it does sort of leave out some important bits here. What kind of stuck with me was that on that first page, that first page itself is a little crowded. There are kind of too many panels on it, I think. But the younger prince wakes up and he wants to get the storm stone. He mentions he wants the flyer, which we see as kind of a glider, and the guy tells him the storm stone's magic is too volatile, it's not stabilized. And then we do see the glider a couple pages later, but I completely missed. I mean, it needed to be pointed out more clearly that the stone was attached to the tip of it. I missed that completely. And then by the time we got to page 11 and it became important, I was like, wait, what stone? What stone? So that needed a little more, like a close-up on it, or a line of dialogue. The Stormstone is here in this flyer. See, there it is right there. I mean, it's in the art, but it's easy to overlook because it's kind of far away when we see it.
Yeah, that was a problem for me, and I could see what they're going for, but I could see that they were just falling short in almost everything that they were doing. Because it was too much. It was a little unfocused. And I can understand that he's like, I want to go from here to here in this first issue. And he's got maybe 2 issues worth of stuff crammed in. So we're switching up scenes every... see, in the first page, we go through 3 different locations. Mm-hmm. And so it starts with the Kingdom of the Golden Phoenix, which is like an overall shot. And then within the walls of Castle Freedom, and then soon after at the Castle Research Center. I was like, man, it's too much. Mm-hmm. Slow. But other thing I wanted to point out was that a little bit on the coloring, it's a little airbrushy in a lot of things. But I mean, it's okay. But do you remember back in 1986 when The Dark Knight first came out? I think that was the first time I recognized these thought balloons as boxes rather than the traditional or Silver Age, Golden Age thought balloon.
Yeah. The narration boxes rather than the fluffy cloud thought balloons.
Right. And so these green narration boxes, who's narrating?
It's the magician guy who's kind of sneaking around watching what's going on.
And the only way that we pick that up is how?
Well, I mean, I didn't have much trouble with it because in the very first panel, those green boxes are surrounding the guy as he's standing on top of some kind of Washington Monument thing there. And throughout that page, they're sort of hovering around him. So I caught that it was always him.
Yeah, but it's an assumption. In The Dark Knight Returns, each character had their own narration bits, and each of them was colored according to the costume that the person was wearing. So Robin had yellow, Batman had like a kind of 50% gray. Mm-hmm. Superman, I think, had like blue. Mm-hmm. But it was very clear who was thinking and who wasn't. Here, this green box with a green outline and a gradation fill in each box does not match the character that is actually thinking it. And the reason why you are right to assume that it's that character is because of positioning and because of context. Because he'll start a thought within the within the thought box and then end it with the dialogue. So it's contextual. Mm-hmm. But this lime green stuff does not match the character, and so it stands out to me as kind of an eyesore. I aesthetically disagree with it in the strongest of ways.
Okay.
But yeah, looking at book 1 versus book 2, book 2 is a lot cleaner, a lot sharper in colors and in the way the characters are drawn, the way that the shots are set up. Everything seems much more studied, and it's actually well done in the second issue. But the first issue, man, it was a slog for me to get through. I'm sorry to say. And so when it came to getting to the second issue, I was like, you know what? No, I'm good. And also, it's late. I got to start the podcast.
Yeah, I don't know. I think by the end of issue 1, I was kind of like, okay, yeah. I mean, we say we'll read 30 pages and more if we're interested, and I was interested enough to go on to issue 2. And yeah, I would have finished issue 3 if I hadn't had too many other things to do today. But yeah, it gets better. But yeah, that's a problem when your first issue is off-putting because people might not stick around for the better follow-up issues.
Yeah, consistency is a little bit hard, especially if you're starting your career or you don't have that much of kind of a work experience built up. Because like it feels like there's at least a good year between the two books, as far as the art goes. Just with perspective and the way the shots are set up, the way the characters are drawn, everything is just levels above in the second issue. It does look like the same artist, but it just looks more studied. It has clarity and focus.
Yeah.
But yeah, the colors are also better, but it's the same colorist. Yeah, inker, colorist, and cover art is by the same person. And pencils. Sorry, I'm just checking for issue 2. Yeah, and so same artist team on issue 1 and issue 2. But it looks like they both leveled up a bit before they came back for issue 2. But I wanted to ask you, how's the pacing in issue 2 compared to issue 1?
Yeah, I didn't think about the pacing so much, but I did think it was better. The only problem I found with issue 2 and also issue 3 a little bit, so they both start with like a page where the characters are telling us what happened in the previous issue. Right. And I felt like the way it's explained makes it a little difficult. I mean, the reason you have a recap page is for people who missed the last issue, but how the previous issue was explained was a little hard to understand if you hadn't actually read the issue.
Yeah, and it seems to be breaking the fourth wall a bit.
Well, yeah, it is, definitely.
Yeah, it also seems like the blue guy, what's his name?
Tyson.
Yeah, lost his face paint, and he's got indestructible skin except for his balls.
I also almost feel like this first page of issue 2 might be done by a different artist. It doesn't look quite the same.
It does look a little different, or maybe it was just a last second. Hey, throw this together. You've got 30 minutes before we go to press, because it's very rough.
But the reason I say that it's a little hard to understand if you didn't actually read the previous issue. So we've got this young woman named Melody who talks a little strangely, like English is not her first language. And she says the king sent me and Beryl on a secret mission. Well, Beryl, what, like a wooden barrel? It's a character's name. It's the ogre, but you have to know that when you're reading this. So I think if you're going to have a recap page, it should be to help people not only remember the first issue, but people who didn't read the first issue, because they always say every issue is someone's first. So a recap page needs to fill in those of us who missed the previous chapter.
Also, although their idea is kind of cute and clever, it's a little too clever. You would have actually done better to grab individual panels from the previous issue, and just do a previously. Yeah,
I agree.
And just narrate the hell out of it. Maybe have just one person up in the upper left-hand corner saying, "Okay, this is what happened, and let me walk you through it." And then you have the panels, and then you have the person talking over the panels to kind of get you through, like they have here, but without wonky art.
Yeah, so in that case, if she says he sent me and Beryl on a secret mission, you'd have a picture of her and Beryl and being sent on the secret mission, and then you wouldn't, we would understand, oh, Beryl's that guy.
Yeah, but also if you were to try and recap on the previous thing, then all the world building that was done in the first issue, especially with that page of text, the wall of text in the first page, none of that was necessary.
Yeah.
And so reading the second one, I'm just thinking, okay, what the fuck was up with that first one in the 200 years after the Great Wars and blah, blah, blah. But back to the first issue, the setup or the world building seemed to me to kind of mimic Dune the movie. Not the David Lynch one, but the one that David Lynch refused to be a part of, that the studio recut, so it was actually directed by Alan Smithy.
That's the one with Sting in it, right?
Yeah. Alan Smithy is the name that Hollywood directors use in place of their real name when they don't want to be associated with the film because it's not their vision. And so that one opens up with a monologue by one of the characters looking directly into the camera, saying, "Know then that it is the year blah, 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 and this is what it is, and these are the different houses, and all of this stuff." And it very much like this first page. And then it gets into this kind of like royal family bullshit. Things are moving and the future is coming, and there's this young boy who wants to impress his father, and he's being tested by witches, and but that in Dune it was with combat, and in this one it's with a hang glider with a gem on the front, and so it just felt a little bit samey to me, in that there was intense world building, a lot of like, for a lot of the beginning of Dune, if you're not familiar with the book or the story, you're fucking lost. What the hell is this? It's beautiful and scary, but what is this? In this case, it's not really beautiful or scary, but I was kind of lost for a large part of the beginning. But by the time it kind of started to kind of gel together, kind of didn't care. So it really needs to take more time to kind of structure itself and build up these characters. And it's been a while since I've said it on the podcast, but I'll say it again. Telling the audience exactly what's going to happen and then doing that thing correctly doesn't necessarily bore the audience. Think about Guy Ritchie's Sherlock Holmes, the one with Robert Downey Jr. in the beginning. There's a scene where he's fighting this guy, and then he's like, "I've got no time for this. I've got to go. This is what I'm going to do." And he runs down in his mind, and they show in slow motion, in fact, exactly what he's going to do. And then he does all of that stuff exactly as he described it, and then walks away because the fight's done. And it's a scene that works quite well. Study the scene and why it works, and try to apply some of that here, because I don't need to be left in the dark. That's not intrigue. That's a lack of information. Another way is with Inception. They said, okay, here's the plan. And oh shit, that didn't work, but we're already in the middle of the shit. How can we fix this? And they started fixing it on the fly. And that's also kind of interesting. They did the same thing with, I think, Ocean's 11. No, Ocean's 8. Which one was it? Ocean's 11 with George Clooney. Ocean's 8 was the most recent one. But anyway, yeah, leaving the reader in the dark does not help your story. It should be very clear. And that big reveal of whatever in that Star Wars film about whose father's who, you don't need to have that shit happen on every page, because without background, without at least a couple of issues of something, that big reveal doesn't mean anything. So having all of this kind of come at me half-assedly is just not working that well here. Second issue may be better. It seems like they got more into the characters. Great. But I didn't read it. Probably not going to read it. This one's not for me. But I can recognize where they did much, much better in the second issue.
Mm-hmm. When you watched Batman as a kid, you enjoyed the colorful heroes and villains, the text sound effects on the screen, the thrill of watching a heroic crime fighter escaping from death traps and taking down bad guys. But the show was devised to interest adults too. What did you miss as a kid? Sexual innuendo.
The penguin's too small for me.
Closeted gay characters.
I like that cape, Batman.
Freudian death traps.
Has the giant clam really swallowed Robin?
Police incompetence.
Bruce Wayne is a millionaire playboy. Hardly a secret identity for Batman.
Whether you're a kid or an adult, there's something to like about our favorite Caped Crusader. Tim and Paul dig for the deeper meanings under the Batmania every other Thursday. What's the podcast's name?
To the Batpoles. To the Batpoles. To the Batpoles.
All right. Secondly, this time, we have Rage in the Shadows, Issue 1, written by Ralph Henriquez and art by Emilio Utrera. Ralph sent this to us, and I'm just going to read the summary he gave because this gives the idea of the story. It's a story of federal agent Angelica Garcia, who is genetically enhanced via a secret, untested serum, originally meant to cure diseases within the human body. The serum gives her enhanced strength, speed, agility, and invulnerability. Unfortunately, the serum which has given her special abilities is also killing her. It's a race against time to find a cure before the serum kills her. And on top of it, during her search for a cure, she must rescue her kidnapped family from deadly mercenaries who want the serum so they can sell it to the highest bidder on the black market. I don't know, just reading that, it's kind of a question. So, if it, I mean, I wonder how it can make you invulnerable and also kill you. Just sort of doesn't quite seem to fit together. But, yeah, anyway. Aside from that, I thought the sort of plotting of this, the story was fine. The art was a little rough. I didn't really have... Nothing else really kind of popped out at me. What was your thought on this one?
Okay, I'm going to have to go a little hard on this one.
Uh-oh.
It's not good. Boom.
Writing, art, both?
Okay, I'm going to get into it. And, okay, first, Ralph Henriquez is the writer and the editor. And
yeah, I know that didn't work out very well for Marvel in the 70s when they tried that, writer-editors.
Really? I didn't know that they tried that, but I'm not a fan of Marvel. But a writer will throw out ideas, anything and everything, and an editor will sometimes say this is good, this is bad, this doesn't work. But when it's the writer and the editor, when the writer and the editor are the same person, you'll get something where the writer will throw out an idea and there's no one to say, hey, but what about this? Or hey, you're missing something. And it's much, much more difficult to produce a really focused story or script. And so you have to be very, very aware of your own mistakes.
Yeah.
And the goals of what you're trying to do. And in this book, it seems that he's missed a couple of those things. One, there are some poor word choices for some of these things, for some of the dialogue. For example, I guess that would be page 4, the last panel. I repeat, evacuate the premises. We're extracting the hostage to Rendezvous C. Do you copy? I'm assuming that that's the bad guy who's speaking.
Yeah.
the bad guy is speaking and the bad guy already has the hostage, then the bad guy doesn't need to extract the hostage.
Okay.
I mean, would you agree? I mean, I do understand what the intent here was extract, meaning remove from one place and put in another place.
Yeah, moving the hostage.
But extract also has the at least inference, but I think meaning of removing the hostage from the dangerous situation with the bad guys to the safe situation of the good guys.
Yeah, that makes sense.
So here, this word doesn't quite work. It doesn't apply.
Yeah.
And there was one or two others, but that's just an example. The artwork, for the most part, works when you're looking at the main character or at the characters, the way they move, the way they kind of interact. For the most part, works. But at a certain point, there's just a lack of backgrounds, so it's really hard to understand who is where and doing what. That's just completely gone.
Yeah, that particularly popped out at me on page 18, where Angelica's husband is talking to his female boss, and she pushes him, and there's a crash, but we don't see what's making a crash sound because it's just a plain green background. There's no furniture or anything in any panel on that page, except in the final panel that's in silhouette. There's some papers that are kind of floating through the air, and there's some objects on the floor. But yeah, that crash, we need to see what's crashing.
Yeah.
Otherwise, it looks like the crash is caused by her grabbing his shirt, which doesn't really make sense.
Yeah, that was a little bit weird. Also, actually, this was where the other instance of word usage was a little off. Okay, we were on the verge of fine-tuning the serum to complete perfection. If you're on the verge of something, it's something is about to happen, but happen to perfection is not usual usage here. You're on the verge of a discovery, whether it's a very finely tuned discovery or a sloppy discovery is not the thing. But if you're fine tuning it, it means it's already done. You're just putting in the last little details. Or it's ready for human trials, so it can be tested before it goes to market, if you're doing that kind of drug testing. But yeah, on the verge of fine-tuning is a really poor phrase here.
Yeah, it's kind of clumsy.
Well, it also doesn't quite make sense. But the logic error that I saw here in this scene was that he blew the whistle on the group that he was working for, which I suppose is some sort of thug operation that he wasn't aware of before he started working for them. And then she says, "We have your daughter held hostage." Now, this is the daughter that was rescued a few pages prior, so either she's lying or she doesn't know, but it's not clear. "And to up the ante, I injected your wife with the serum. It's only a matter of time before the serum kicks in." So basically, the bad guys made her a superhero, and then thereby forcing him to perfect the serum for their super soldier serum, which is going to do what for his wife? He'd be looking for a cure at that point.
Yeah.
So there's a logic flaw that runs through this scene, which is so big. It kind of stopped me cold. But there are other things. All women in this book wear tight, skin-tight cat outfits and have the same hairstyle.
Yeah, that it is a little hard to tell them apart. I was confused when the boss showed up at first.
Yeah. Also, the boss has a jacket that says Police Homeland Security, which I don't quite understand. Is he police or is he Homeland Security? Because police is local and Homeland Security is federal. But if he's police, how can she be her boss if she's Homeland Security? None of it quite made sense. And so there seem to be a lot of TV tropes which are kind of lazily thrown into this story, not really considered for how they work or what it really is. And don't crib from TV is all I can say. And it seems that that's what was going on here. So we have a story that wasn't ready to be produced, not by a long shot. We have a writer who did no research on what it actually is, and we have the writer also editing his own work when he's not willing to do research on what things are or into how police work. He most definitely should not be editing his own writing. So that's why at the end of this comic, I'm like, it's not good. It's not to say that he's a bad writer. It's to say that he didn't do his homework. And there's a difference there. And I'm sure the writer is listening, so I want him to know that I'm not saying that you can't make good comics. I'm saying that this one here was not ready. And you let it loose too soon.
Yeah, that makes sense.
And artistically, yeah, again, background is not just a context of characters. Background is a character. And so if you treat all of your characters the same, then there should be more backgrounds here. It looks like the colorist had to make up for the lack of backgrounds.
Mm-hmm.
And the artist did his own colors, so he went that way. But that opening shot, the splash page, good composition, well lit, actually decently colored, a little bit light on backgrounds, and light on details. And it looks like some of the computer graphics were a little bit rough around some parts. It looks like you used a vector program to construct the warehouse. But I also don't believe that door to that small warehouse is the outside of the next page. It's very, very much different. But it seems like everything was just pushed a little bit too hard and a little too fast. Or the writer and the artist didn't quite have enough time to do the job completely. And so, for those reasons, I say no. Not this one.
Okay. By the way, I didn't mention this is from Henriquez Comics. It's a publisher.
Henriquez?
Yeah. Henriquez. Or, yeah, the cover, it says HQC, and then it says Henriquez Comics. So.
That's a very curious name.
Yes.
What's the meaning there?
I wonder if this is Ralph Henriquez's own imprint. So the Henriquez might be probably from his name. Just
I see.
From Henriquez, just drop the UEZ.
I see. Oh, that's kind of clever. But anyway, man. Next time you make a comic, send it in. But please avoid the mistakes you made on this one. I would love to see what you do next.
Yeah, and I should apologize for not getting to this one sooner. It got overlooked. Well, one of these got overlooked. I can't remember which one it was now. One of them got. It was Giovanni's that was sent months ago, and I forgot to tag it, and then he wrote back and said, "Hey, my comic," and I said, "Oh, yeah, there it is. Sorry about that." So yeah, we we finally covered that one.
Yeah. But I think we've been missing a lot of emails recently, or at least been getting them in the wrong order. But yeah, we'll get through all of them eventually.
Yeah. Well, more keep coming in, so we've got our work cut out for us here.
That's okay. Keep sending them, and even though I may say some shit sometimes, it's for the benefit of the artist and the people who listen.
We also got mail just the other day from Chad Bilyeu. Remember, he did the Chad in Amsterdam comic that we liked?
Oh, yeah, I love that.
So he says, "This is Chad. I just realized that I never wrote after the podcast. Thank you for reviewing my comics. It really means a lot. I appreciate the feedback from you guys. It's to hear... I think you're missing a word here. It's maybe nice to hear honest, impartial thoughts on what I'm doing. So I'd like to first thank you for pronouncing my name properly. Usually it gets butchered. You all made a comment regarding fiction that I've written. I don't remember that. I actually haven't done any fiction as of yet. I have something that I think is a pretty good idea that I'm currently in the formative stages with. I hope to be working with EKS Graphics on it. She's the artist behind the Dutch words here, Amsterdam and Spinontje stories in issue 1 and 2, respectively. I'll keep you all posted. I have a prose project I've been slacking on called Pomegranate Juice and Plastic Bags. Maybe I'll finish it one day. I'll be doing a Kickstarter for my 3rd issue. I don't really need the funds, but I think it's a good thing to try. I have some great surprises as far as artists go. You guys know your comics, so I think you'll be happy. I'll be certain to send over an advance copy in April."
Oh, sweet.
So,
actually, I think I commented that I like the story so much. I wonder if he was writing anything that was fiction, because it's all nonfiction stories. With elements of fictional writing, or I don't know exactly how to phrase it, but yeah. And so I think that's what he's answering. But
yeah, that sounds right.
Yeah, no, I'm looking forward to that. But just to a little advice, even if you don't need the money, if you're asking for it, don't say that part.
Yeah. And we have one more letter. Well, this was actually a Facebook comment when I put the podcast on our Facebook page and our Facebook group every time. I can't remember which one this was from, group page or group, but this was in reaction to the Critiquing Comics episode about These Savage Shores, written by Ram V. So Zane says, "Went through the podcast. I do agree with certain points raised about the pace of the story and the historical overlap, but I believe that is due to the geographical nature of the work itself. To a Western audience, it indeed feels like a history lesson, but to anyone from the South Asian subcontinent, these characters are history itself. Yet never before have they been dealt with in terms of speculative or historical fiction. Lastly, the Indianness of it lies in the Eastern storytelling framework. Most lore or folk tales here do not have the promise that usual Western stories have. Neither is our way of telling the hero's journey similar to that employed by most Western writers. Everything said, thank you for the wonderful podcast. Looking forward to hearing you guys cover more diverse stories." So I wasn't sure what to say, so I just replied, "Thanks." So that was kind of lame, but
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, we're not accustomed to getting stories that might be based in a culture that's not Japan and not a native English-speaking culture. So, I mean, maybe we might have missed a different storytelling style there. I'm not sure.
Well, actually, it's kind of interesting. I'm glad that he points out the differences, but I would like if he is listening to this later, to come back and give us a little bit more on some of these differences in hero's journey or storytelling style, because I mean that is actually a really interesting point. And I did feel that I was missing quite a bit for not being familiar with the history. But that being said, it is a comic book made for a worldwide market, so there has to be some sort of allowance for that in the writing. Mm-hmm. It's not to say that we are absolutely correct in our criticisms of it, but it's to say that perhaps there's a middle ground between our review and the comic that both sides are missing. Mm-hmm. So, I mean, if Zayn Nakvi could come in and talk a little bit more about what he feels these differences are, I'd really appreciate it.
Sure, yeah, that would be cool. And you don't have to use Facebook. You can write to mail@deconstructingcomics.com. That's a little easier to deal with, maybe.
Yeah.
Okay. So do you have any questions for me? Let's get that out of the way. Do you have any questions?
Actually, yeah. Did you talk about your trip to the States?
Not on the podcast. Well, yeah. So that's coming up. It's mostly a family thing, but it's also related to the Batpoles podcast. I'm going to a Batman conference in a small college town in Ohio. So keep an eye on To the Batpoles podcast in later this spring for maybe the results of that. I'm not quite sure how it's going to affect the podcast, but I'm sure it'll be mentioned there.
So if any fan in the area wants to buy you a beer because you're a cool guy working really hard on a comics podcast, going on what, 13 years now?
Let's see. Well, we first recorded right before Thanksgiving of 2005, and it came out in early December of that year. So, do the math.
Yeah. Well, anyway.
Yeah, 13 years and change.
If anybody wants to buy you a beer, where can they buy it for you?
Okay. So first I'll be at my parents'. So Cedar Rapids, Iowa, from let's see, March 21st to April 4th. Then I'm going to be visiting my alma mater in Rock Island, Illinois, from, I'm thinking right now, the 4th to the 6th of April. Then I'm thinking I'll go to Chicago a few days and then to Bowling Green, Ohio. The Batman conference is the 12th and 13th of April.
Well, man, I just meant the Batman conference. Like, people wouldn't necessarily be able to walk up to your parents' house and say, hey.
No, but they can always write to me if they wanted to buy me a beer in another location that I'm going to be in.
Okay, but I'm just saying, if you're going to be at the Batman conference, then they can just walk up to you there and say, hey, aren't you Tim? Let me buy you a beer. I really enjoy To the Batpoles.
Okay.
And that's the idea of it.
Okay.
Yeah, but I guess that's my only. Actually, no, I've got one more question. Are we doing another one of these before you go?
Yeah, I'm hoping we can get another couple done so we can get these comics critiqued, because they're piling up.
Okay, well.
Speaking of comics, how is your production going lately? I know you've had other issues going on distracting you.
Yeah. I'm coming up to the end of the first part of the project. It's actually I'm doing a demo for this comic, so we can shop it around and see if anybody bites. According to the producer, it'll get published either way, but just start with the demo. So I'm almost finished with that. I'm really, really liking the quality of the book, even if the pacing is a little bit slow right now. But I've got kind of my foot in, or my toes, my fingers in a couple of different projects running all at the same time. At the same time, I'm also trying to revamp my website, which I've kind of done a little bit. I'm starting to post again. I've kind of archived all the old stuff, so all of those old articles are done. I'm starting to get to work on Mind Gator number 3. It's going to be a limited series of 4 issues, possibly extended to 5. I don't know, but the project should have been finished like years ago. But it's like Kickstarters take a lot out of me. And, I've done 3 or 4 now, so I'm getting pretty tired. So I'm trying to find other ways to fund the project, which is what's taking so long. But if nothing happens by June, if I have no announcements to make about that by June, I may just go to Kickstarter again and say, okay, issue 3, issue 4, and done with the series. But it's there's a lot that I'm doing. And that's not to mention any of the other projects I want to do. They're all just kind of like waiting. It's like it's having constipation for about 2 years, and you can't even sit up without breaking a sweat because you're just so full. And that's where I'm at right now.
Okay. So what's the creative output? What's the analogy to your creative output in that metaphor? I think you need to find a different metaphor.
You want to buy one of my turd creations? Yeah, anyway, you're right. You're right. Well, it's artistic constipation. Output is art, not poo, or at least I hope it's not poo. Poo to some. What is it? One man's poo is another man's treasure.
Something like that. Yeah.
But anyway, that's kind of where I'm at. Drowning in projects, but also learning to draw them and push them forward faster. So there you go.
Okay, so like I said, we've got a number of comics in the queue already, but if you'd like us to critique your work, go ahead and send a PDF or a link to mail@deconstructingcomics.com. And each comic we get, we'll read at least 30 pages of, and we'll talk about on this podcast. So till next time, this is Tim.
Oh, by the way, man, do you have time to see a movie or 2 before you go?
I might have time to do one. I'm still kind of debating on how those podcasts are going to come out, if it'll be Patreon or in the Deconstructing Comics feed or some other way. But yeah, I'm thinking in the 2 free weeks that I have before I go, maybe I can critique one. As we're recording this, the episode where we ask for listener comments has just come out. So we'll see what comes in. Okay.
Well, still waiting for comments.
Now, if we don't get anything, well, then we'll have to figure out which one to do. But what's the next out of Marvel Universe one after Iron Man 2? I don't even remember.
I think maybe Thor 2.
Or probably Thor 1.
Well, Thor 1 wasn't very good, and Thor 2 was worse. Thor 3 was excellent, though. I really like that. But like I said, really just watch Thor 3, maybe Black Panther, and then go into Infinity War. It's the super short version of what, 10 years of build-up.
Okay, but I mean, if we're going to do a series on this, we might as well do a series, but and cover more than that. But Anyway, we can talk about this later.
Okay. Well, in that case, and Mulele.
And thanks for listening to Critiquing Comics. Next week on Deconstructing Comics, Coom and Rob discuss Daredevil Born Again by Frank Miller and David Mazzucchelli.